Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this beautiful ASBN sustainability on this lovely spring day. As I was saying, we are in Ghana today, land of the Ghana people, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And we know that we have a lot to learn from Ghana people in particular and First Nations people in general. And it's very relevant to today's conversation. So Deb will be taking us through a general conversation about Lot 14 and the sustainability strategy for the precinct. And then we'll zoom into the Aboriginal Cultural Centre and the process that the dsquared are undergoing there. So Deb, if you'd like to share your screen and take it away.
Great. Thanks very much for inviting me to chat this morning about my favourite project at the moment, the Aboriginal Arts and Cultural Centre. I feel myself and the team at dsquared feel very privileged to be able to work on such a landmark project for Adelaide in terms of its sustainability aspirations, and also as a symbol of Aboriginal reconciliation. I've just got some slides to show you guys. You might have seen some of the imagery in the news recently, but I thought I'd just take you on a little bit of a journey through what we've been working on so far. And then, yeah, I think we've got time for questions at the end. So I'd love to hear your questions and chat about the project more. Just as a general overview, this is the Lot 14 site, and people in Adelaide will know that this used to be the Royal Adelaide Hospital site. I see there's a few people from Interstate on the line as well, so welcome. Yeah, so the old hospital site, there's been a lot of demolition and construction happening there for a while. We've been really fortunate to be working with Renewal SA on the sustainability strategies across this site. It is a 6-star Green Star certified community, and it's also was the first project, and I believe still the only project in Australia to achieve a WELL Communities rating, looking at the health and wellbeing aspects of the precinct. We're also working on all of the heritage buildings that you can see along North Terrace there. All of the buildings on the site have to achieve a 6-star Green Star rating. So Renewal SA really set the bar pretty high for the redevelopment of this project. In the bottom right hand corner there, you can see the Aboriginal Arts and Cultural Centre, which couple of weeks back, Stephen Marshall released these images, the big Premier's announcement to say that this was what was coming for the site. It's certainly an unusual and striking building, and I think has invoked some interesting responses from people in the architectural community, and also in the wider Adelaide community. And from what I hear on the streets, it's all been overwhelmingly positive. People are really excited to see such a landmark building. I'd be interested to hear some of your thoughts. But we've been working with the team from, so we've got Woods Bagot Architecture locally in Adelaide, supported by DSNR from New York, so bringing that international flavour to the team. And we've just finished the concept design, so it's still in design stage at the moment, so we're still working through the journey of designing the project. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what's to me been quite unusual about this project, and what I've enjoyed so much about working with the team. As you would expect, with it being an Aboriginal Arts and Cultural Centre, we have undergone quite well Aboriginal consultation, but it's been really extensive on this project. And in fact, Woods Bagot have been going through this process now for several years, and we at dsquared really just became involved this year. But even then, we've been having a series of workshops. We actually had something I've never done before in a project, and we had a whole day workshop with an Aboriginal coach who came in to talk to us to try to get the design team to have a deeper understanding of the importance of Aboriginal culture, as much as you can learn in a day, but still it was quite an intensive day, and to think about what's important in terms of the built form, so that we could really have the architectural design and the ESD design and the engineering and everything coming from more of that sort of grounding, rather than just how we would normally design buildings. So really not just a lip service to consultation, and we've always been told that the key driver for this project is to be welcoming to Aboriginal communities from all around Australia, as a place where they can connect, enjoy, have a deeper understanding and a celebration of the arts and culture. And then secondly, it's a place where everybody else is also welcome. So really with that, the big focus on Aboriginal communities. And I love the fact that it's from all over Australia. It's not just our local Aboriginal population here, but it's to be welcoming to everyone. And that the next couple of slides just show some of the workshopping that we've done to help inform the concept design. So yep, that acknowledgement of place, celebration, respect, coming together, meeting people, feeling safe, feeling welcome, and how do you bring that into the built form? And also then looking at, like I said, the diversity of the Aboriginal population from around Australia, considering the language groups, considering how, you know, the song lines, how people move around, and the different types of spaces that we have in Australia, the desert, the ocean, the river, and what that means to the Aboriginal culture. And then how can we bring some of the traditional Aboriginal forms? This is just an example slide of the woven basket. How can we bring that into the built form, and using some of those ideas to think about things that you might see if you look closely at the images, the idea of the woven basket definitely being brought into the building facade. Our role then really was to think about what does that mean for sustainability, and obviously a lot of the themes align really well with sustainable design initiatives. This is some slides that we worked through early in the concept design, where we were looking at the concepts of sky, land and earth, and thinking about what that meant in the Aboriginal culture, and then thinking about what that meant to us as sustainability consultants. And you can just see there in some of the ideas, there's a lot of overlaps of things like how do we get daylight into buildings, fresh air, how do we design a space that changes with the seasons and can adapt to climate change? How do we address spirituality, well-being, the need for people to gather, meet and move around the space, and that connection with nature, which is something that's been a really key theme. We talk a lot about biophilic design and how we can incorporate those ideas into buildings, but this is like a key component. How do we make sure that that the building is so sort of intrinsically connected with nature that it's just part of the space, and there's almost no delineation between the landscaping and the built form. Also, at the same time, recognizing that it is an art gallery and there are some delicate pieces of art to be kept in this space. So how do we deal with those spaces to make sure that some spaces are actually quite highly controlled? You know, humidity needs to be managed, temperature needs to be managed to ensure the integrity of the artwork. But then in other spaces, having them much more open, much more organic and connected to nature. This is just some ideas around energy. So obviously trying to get fresh air, natural ventilation into the systems, allowing for things like wider set points so that people can move in and out of the space and not feel like they're transitioning to an air-conditioned space. And the same with water, so looking at natural flows across the site, thinking about not only just this site, but how it connects to the wider River Torrens, and then how it connects all the way through from the Adelaide Hills to the sea, and trying to play a part in that, and also being very mindful of the connection to the Botanic Gardens right next door. We'll also spend quite a lot of time looking at embodied energy, that being a big topic in sustainability at the moment. So how can we look at natural materials, natural concepts? Can we use timber, and how does that work to not only reduce the embodied energy of the project, but also have the biophilic connections, and also connecting back to some of those early Aboriginal concepts as well. So all of this has come together. This is a slide with a lot of words, but I just thought I'd throw it up there to generate our key ESD initiatives for this project. So it's a building that's designed to be carbon neutral ready. It's going to be all electric, you know, ticking some of these big ESD concepts that are happening at the moment. We have recycled water available to the whole Lot 14 site, so there's the opportunity to connect with that. Creating those indoor environments for health and well-being, being adaptive to climate change and being resilient, and also, of course, thinking about pandemic responsive design. If we want to welcome people back to buildings, I think that's a fundamental design move as well. All of this coming together, obviously there's some benchmarking required at the Lot 14 site. So we're looking at a 6-star Green Star rating to celebrate and recognise the sustainability aspirations of the project, and also a well health safety rating, which some of you may be familiar with. So not going the full well rating, but more focused on the safety aspects to make sure that people feel like that they're in a safe space and that the health and well-being has been considered. And all of that coming together, I've sort of run through all that very quickly so that there's lots of time for chat, but all of that coming together to this. This is one of the media images that was just released a couple of weeks ago, showing the layering of the spaces there. We've got in the foreground there, we've got the natural amphitheatre. So this is where people can gather and connect. We've got the botanics just behind that, just to try and orientate yourself, and North Terrace would be in front. Going into this building where you can enter at ground level, be connected with the landscape, and then make your way up through the building into those more conditioned spaces in the art gallery spaces. And then the facade sort of weaving and wrapping over the building, connecting down to the ground to give that connection to ground, but then also providing those opportunities for daylight, fresh air, and connection with nature throughout the whole building. That was sort of the end of my presentation. I need to just have a look and see if I can see the comments. Maybe Yaara, you'll start to dip in with some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said before we started, I have so many questions myself, but I don't want to hog the conversation. So if anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and we will read them out. But I will hog the conversation for a minute, Deb, and just talk to you a little bit about the consultation process, because it's something that I'm personally very curious about. And it's also something that's really topical for a lot of architects at the moment. Can you take us through the process and just explain a little bit about how the design team has been navigating that process, and what sort of challenges and opportunities did you encounter, in particular around, you know, reconciliation and healing of country and those aspects of the project?
Yeah, sure. Well, one thing I can say is that a lot of the consultation has gone on with the architectural team, and often as ESD consultants, we don't get to see any of that. You know, we're not normally involved heavily in that stage. We tend to get the outcomes, and we work with engineers and everybody to come up with the design. But in this case, we have been invited along with the landscape consultants and the engineers to be more involved, but haven't been involved in all the older discussions, probably, Yaara, where they dealt with some of the complexities and issues more. Very much what we've been involved in has been looking to the past, trying to understand the healing, but being very much more positive and thinking about how we can create a space that celebrates the culture and is very welcoming. It's been a very positive lens. on previous projects, I suppose, where we've talked about, there's issues of Aboriginal heritage, and sometimes there can be challenging discussions to overcome about the space use. This one's been, as I said, it's sort of been a very positive interaction. Lots of discussions about how the spaces can be used for performances, for smoking ceremonies, for celebration. The landscaping design is really fascinating in that there's areas designed for plants from all over the country. So a lot of the focus has been on, well, what plants should we have there? How will they grow in the Adelaide climate? What do they mean to people?
Fantastic. And Simon actually has a question for you about landscaping. So Simon.
Thank you very much. Yeah, really, I'm interested to know a little bit more. We've talked a lot about the building, and although, Deborah, you've just spoken briefly about the landscape and so on, I'm interested to understand the various spaces around the building as well, and how that might sort of engage some of the cultural activities. You've mentioned the smoking ceremonies and the like, but I'm sure there's more curation to that space than you've talked about at the moment. Can you give us a little bit more in that regard?
Yeah, so Oculus are the landscape consultants, and they've been very heavily involved in working with the architectural team throughout the process so far at the concept design stage. And I think a lot more details still to come. On the North Terrace side, we do have celebration of water. So we have there's various types of water pools. So taking you through the journeys from more active water movement and natural flows across the site to like reflection ponds, so trying to connect with water and how water makes you connect with the space, and also using that as a space for gathering. The design of connecting this amphitheatre into the botanics, I know there's a lot of work being done around that to make sure that there's that sort of seamless connection. And there are those areas, like I mentioned, where there's different plantings from around the country. And from our perspective, from sustainability side, we've been looking a lot at how we can create what we're calling, a climate refuge. So how can people come to this part of Adelaide on a hot day and be cool because of the shading and the canopy cover, and how can it also provide warmth in winter as well, so we get plenty of northern light into these spaces so people can mingle and dwell there. So I hope that's answered some of your question. I think it's very much still a work in progress as we move into the detailed design, how all the spaces can be programmed and how the landscaping can help with that.
Thanks,
and we
Deborah.
actually have another question along this vein from Aaron. So Aaron, if you'd like to just jump in and ask your question. I know it's a long one, but I'll let you read it for us.
Sure, I was going to let you do the long question. Apologies that it's very long, but I know it's very early in the project, but my question really comes down to whether there has been any money or project budget or time set aside for an evaluation of working with Aboriginal culture peoples in this way and looking at incorporating sustainability features that aren't necessarily the tick boxes of Green Star into the project, and whether there's any time or project budget or any mechanism set aside for how you're going to feed that back into the Green Star community's rating process and those other tools that you are using as well.
Thank you for the question, Aaron. There is ongoing consultation. The Green Star community's rating is I suppose being managed by Renewal SA across the whole site. And there is an ongoing Aboriginal consultation and engagement program through that, and they have a RAP that they are implementing, and this project is very heavily part of that. And you're probably aware that they've had various smoking ceremonies for other buildings that have been opening across the site. This project, again, the Aboriginal consultation is ongoing. So here we're looking at a 6-star Green Star rating for the building alone. So now that's the building within the community. And if you want to look at the points, yes, Aboriginal reconciliation is reflected in one of the credits in the Green Star tool, and obviously we're going well beyond the usual requirements here. So I think that the answer to your question is it will be a big focus in detailed design. We need to get into things like modelling the building to look at how much of the building can be opened up on days when, how much of the year in Adelaide can we have this facade fully opened, how much can it be closed so that people are welcomed into the space, looking at things like daylight access to make sure that all aligns with the intent. And then that will be continually, I suppose, discussed back in these ongoing consultation processes. So there's definitely time and budget allocated for that in the project going forward.
Fantastic. Now, I'm not sure if we've got any more questions. Actually, we just got one in from Tin, but Tin, I'm sorry, I'm going to abuse my privileges as a host or hostess. And just as with the rating or the certification process, was there any consideration for a regenerative design framework like LBC or One Planet Living?
Yeah, I suppose Renewal SA have had on the site, obviously we've got the Green Star Communities rating and the WELL rating. I think that they've been really impressed, I suppose, with the way that framework has brought about really strong sustainability initiatives in the project. And so there was a continuation of that, rather than changing to, I suppose, something like an LBC rating being a different rating. So there was a desire to keep going with the Green Star process. That doesn't mean, I suppose, that some of the concepts that are in a tool like the Living Building Challenge and some concepts around regenerative design aren't being considered. I think the biggest thing for us at the moment is really looking very hard at embodied energy and materiality, and making sure that all things that the Living Building Challenge looks at in quite a lot of detail to make sure the materials are, obviously non-toxic, they're local, they have eco-credentials, they're natural where possible, so that we're looking at incorporating timber and stone into, and interior will be things like wool into the project. The use of timber is a big thing for the project at the moment. Can we get some CLT into the structure so that we actually make some really big moves to reduce the embodied energy of the project? I suppose some of the other things are, this site was a hospital block not that long ago. It might be part of the Adelaide Parklands, but it was a very built, solid Adelaide, very ugly building turning its back on the botanics. So being able to turn this into a space that has beautiful landscape, has the cultural connections, and actually gives something back to Adelaide, I think has been a really big focus. So
beautiful. Thank you. I think it embodies the spirit of regeneration in its in and of itself, being a cultural centre and acknowledging the Aboriginal culture in such a strong way. I think it's a very important move. And Tim, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks for presenting, Deborah. I just had a question about whether the building had any passive climate design integrated into it. Being a building of its size, I'd just be interested to see how that, or interested in hearing more about how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea is that the whole of the ground level can be completely opened up. So in terms of passive design, the facade would peel back when the conditions are appropriate. Naturally ventilated space, and there's a central void there that you can sort of almost see a circle in the middle, where we'd look at pulling air through and up through the building. So trying to keep the energy consumption as low as possible, but I suppose more importantly, making it a really welcoming space for people, and using the lovely climate that we have in Adelaide. We have really long periods of time where natural ventilation is appropriate. So using that to make sure that the space is as passively designed as possible, and then recognizing, so there's sort of that layering that you might have seen in the ESD imagery, where we go from a very open ground plane that's very connected with nature and naturally ventilated, up into those art gallery spaces where I said couldn't have natural ventilation in all of those spaces, because some of them have to be quite tightly controlled spaces like you'd be familiar with in an art gallery space, so that when we have artifacts there that are, you know, on show for extended periods, that they're well protected and conserved. But those spaces, where possible, are still filled with as much natural light as possible, to try and make sure that we don't need artificial lighting, and also so that there is that connection with nature. I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure it does. Yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking about with the traditional gallery spaces being quite hermetic. But yeah, it's good to hear that natural light is being integrated into those spaces.
Yeah, and the facade as well, the way that you know, it's sort of, in this image it looks quite heavy on the top, but there's sort of a folding and a lightness to the facade that I think will come out more in the detail. But because of that more solid facade, we end up with really well thermally protected gallery spaces. So where they do have to be air conditioned, they're you know, the thermal boundary of the building is and the envelope of the building is actually very, very good from a thermal perspective. So then when we do need to use energy, it's not as, you know, it's not as energy intensive. And also the intention is that the whole facility will be all electric and powered by renewable energy.
Fantastic. Now we've got a question from Rebecca from the City of Adelaide.
Oh, hello, Yaara, you challenged me. Thanks for that. Looks fabulous, Deborah. Thank you so much for showing us all of the behind the scenes thinking. I'm really excited about it. Just with Green Star, we're just tracking what's happening in Green Star, and you know, it's swapping from the as-built scheme to the building scheme. Are you targeting the 6-star under the old rating or the new one?
It's a great question, Rebecca. And I wasn't sure how much detail to go into that one, because it's quite a, you know, techie detail for the Green Star people, but I think it's great. I
have not got a deep technical knowledge. I have the very broad overview of what the two schemes do.
The intention is to achieve the 6-star rating with the new tool, so the buildings tool, which will be coming in from next year. So
that's fantastic news.
Yeah, so the intention is, you know, thinking to when this building will be opening, you know, in 3 years' time. That will be the norm, and I think everything that we're targeting here from a sustainability perspective fits really well with what the new tool is trying to achieve. So looking more towards carbon neutral ready buildings, looking at embodied energy, looking more at the social and the community side of buildings as well. So that is the intention. The new tool, if anybody on the call is aware of the details, it is currently released, so you can register projects under that new tool now, and it will be mandatory from the end of this year. It's still changing a little bit, so there's still some updates coming out, so we're just watching that and making sure, but we're certainly tracking, and we've designed all of the sustainability initiatives to meet the intent of the new tool.
Oh, that's great news. Well, we're fully aware of carbon neutral Adelaide, so hopefully we can offer some support and start to spread those messages and share some of that information.
Excellent.
Good work.
Connections. Fantastic. Connecting the dots. Yeah. Thank you. We've got a couple more questions that have just come in from Andrew and Craig. So Andrew Weller, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question, and then we'll jump on to Craig's question thereafter.
Yeah, hopefully there's not too much background noise, but yes, interested to know if you considered incorporating thermal energy storage into the design to maximise the use of renewables.
Interestingly, there won't necessarily be much or any solar PV on the site. So if you remember back to some of the earlier images, the roof is actually quite an important part of the project, and it will be, I don't think you can see it in this image, but it will be looked down upon from other buildings on the Renewal SA site. So solar PV panels, not necessarily in the traditional sense, not necessarily fitting very well there. What we are looking at, and what we haven't resolved yet, is could we look at some building integrated PV? So could there be parts of the facade that are also PV panels. Now, they won't generate much energy, but it doesn't mean that they won't be able to make a contribution. So instead, it's probably likely that the renewable energy will come from offsite. And obviously, our grid is getting greener all the time here. So having an all-electric building, even if it's connected to the South Australian grid, we're getting greener all the time. But the intention is to have 100% renewable energy supply. So thermal energy storage has been considered as part of the mechanical design. We also looked at geothermal ground loops. It was really, the start of the project was very much, let's get everything on the table and try to start with a clean slate and see what's possible and what's going to create the best solution for the indoor comfort conditions and to make it as low energy as possible. So the services design not yet fully resolved. We're going into the detailed design stage with you know, a lot more exploration into energy consumption, energy strategies to yes, further develop those together with the team at Oricon. So Oricon working on this locally in Adelaide with Bureau Happel providing again that international focus from the UK.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrew, for your question. And thanks, Deborah, for taking us through that detailed explanation of the process. It's really interesting to see how, you know, how much detail has been considered and what a high starting point we've got, how high you've set the bar. And we've got an excellent question from Craig around biophilia, a topic that's very close to all our hearts. So Craig, if you want to ask your question.
Thanks, Yaara. Deborah, we talked a lot about biophilia and connection to the botanic gardens and connections to the parklands. I'm just interested, do plants play a role internally within the building? I guess we're next to North Terrace, a very busy transport corridor, and air quality and connection to planting inside. Are you able to talk to that one?
Yeah, there is an intention to have indoor planting in the atrium area. In fact, there is an idea of having some trees within that space so that it's not just all planting, but actually greenery that sort of grows up and through the building. Obviously, we're all careful of putting trees in atriums in Adelaide because we've had some projects where that hasn't worked so well in the past. But you know, part of our daylight modelling will also be looking at what levels of daylight are in there and what is appropriate for planting. I also think, I don't know if this is related to your question, but there has been a lot of discussion around edible plants in the Aboriginal culture and how that can be connected into the food offerings in the space, so that if there's well, there will be a cafe there, that there, you know, you could have edible plants that are grown on the site offered for sale there. So it's actually becomes part of the whole culture of the experience of being there. You're immersed in the landscape and then you're able to enjoy the produce as well.
Very good. Thank you.
That would be fantastic. A bit of urban farming.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in and once again abuse my my rights and just ask a question about the structural design components? I know we've touched briefly on that, Deb, and it's great to hear that COT is being considered. I just wonder, I've been reading about traditional construction methods of Aboriginal people in Australia. Is it something that has been part of the conversation with the design team?
I'm not terribly sure on that one, Yaara. I suppose that Woods Bagot have been more involved in those conversations, and also I should say as well, Mott MacDonald are the structural engineers, and I know that they've been very much looking at timber and how that and other low embodied materials, looking at metals on the facade, how they can be incorporated. I don't know. I know that there is a program for trying to incorporate Aboriginal workers in the construction, and that's something that Renewal SA have been rolling out on other projects as well. But yeah, I think I need to speak to Woods Bagot and the team at Mott MacDonald as well and find out a bit more about whether or not any Aboriginal construction methods can be incorporated. That's a good one for me to take away.
Well, we happen to know someone that works in Mott MacDonald. So, you know, we may be able to ask that question directly, Ken. So if anyone else has any questions for Deb, feel free to let us know. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. but I absolutely can. Deb, are there any aspects that we can talk about in terms of involvement of other cultural language groups? Because I think the consultation has been mostly with Ghana people, is that right? Or has it been opened up further?
I think that most of the consultation so far has been with Ghana groups talking about the local culture, but I do know that they have engaged with other Aboriginal groups from around Australia as well. Do you mean other languages as well, as in other cultures that we have in Australia?
Well, I don't know. Was that on the table, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that that's like, as I said at the beginning, that's like the secondary approach. So the first thing is making it making the project welcoming to Aboriginal people from all over Australia, and then everybody else. And obviously, this will be a key draw card for international visitors as well. So I think that making it a place where local people and international visitors can visit to learn about Aboriginal cultures has been the biggest driver, rather than, I suppose, any sort of wider consultation with the various other cultures that might visit here. But I think that having something like this in Adelaide, I mean, I hope that it draws people to want to come here to spend time in Adelaide to learn about Aboriginal cultures, to visit this iconic building, hopefully, and then to spend time, dwelling in the area, visiting other cultural attractions whilst they're here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a huge opportunity for South Australia, as I said, as part of our reconciliation process for healing country, and for obviously showcasing to the world how great we are in doing these things. So. Unless anyone has any other questions, I think we might wrap it up here.
Can I actually ask a quick one before we wrap up?
You may, Ken. Yes.
Sorry, Deb. Just because of I just wanted to talk to draw out a little bit more around like the climate resiliency, because you highlighted that as a really important aspect of the design development. And I know there's a little bit of how to make sure that the building is able to almost provide refuge for people when needed. But I know especially within the dsquared process, it's around thinking about like the future climate scenarios and things like that. So could you just give the rest of the people online to kind of a little bit of an idea of what kind of goes into sort of like that climate resilience, future proofing sort of ideation?
So I think Paul's on the line as well. So Paul and I have been working with the team to look at future climate change scenarios. So we've held a workshop looking at, what's the climate going to be like in Adelaide in 10 years' time? What's it going to be like in 2050? Starting to think about how buildings need to be resilient and adaptable to changing environment, to hotter, more extreme temperatures, to bushfire events in the hills, which won't directly affect this facility from a fire perspective, but definitely will from smoke inundation perspective. So we've had some workshops around that. The concept design, we sort of recognised what the climate risks were and started to work in adaptation strategies. These include things like making sure that the thermal envelope is really highly performing to make sure we can cope with increased temperature events, that the mechanical design systems design are designed to cope with that as well. And then also looking at things like flood risk, we're obviously quite close to the Torrens, so if there's a flooding event, how does that affect the space? And then also thinking about I mentioned about the climate refuge idea. So in those outdoor spaces, if we get a prolonged heat wave period, how are we coping with that? We've even had conversations about things like, can you use waste spill air from the mechanical systems to cool the outdoor spaces? So do you do it in a mechanical and active way, or is it done through more passive design with planting? And that's our preference at the moment, that in accordance with the Aboriginal ideologies around the building design and also the biophilic design, that it's as natural as possible and that we can provide shading and the materials that allow those outdoor spaces to be used in future climate change scenarios zeros as well. So that's definitely an ongoing process. There will be more discussion and more depth in that as we move into detailed design. But I think it's a really important part of projects these days. I think we've all learned that I think everyone on this line certainly knows the climate's definitely changing, and the recent bushfires have definitely brought to our attention that we need to design our spaces, our public realm, and our buildings to be able to cope and adapt.
Beautiful. Thank you, Deb. It sounds like it's going to be quite a complex and adaptable building. So very ambitious, and it's great to see that you're going to that level of detail and thinking. It's pretty amazing. Thanks for sharing that with us. And any other questions from the crowd, the team? I think everyone's just in awe, Deb.
Yeah, well, I'll see you all there on the opening day smoking ceremony, hopefully.
Fantastic. What date? We'll put it in our calendars.
Yeah.
So thank you once again on behalf of the ASBN community. It's been absolutely fantastic to get some insights into this iconic project, and I think we're all super excited to see it take shape and come to fruition, and just signpost another great achievement in our reconciliation journey. Yeah, it is, as everyone's saying on the chat, it's just great to see it coming to life, and we really appreciate you sharing it with us as much as you could. We know that there's some other insights that perhaps we can share further down the line, and if you'd be amenable to having further conversations as the building unfolds, I think everyone will be very interested to hear how it's coming together.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you at the next ASBN event.